Hey, we're back live. It's the No Name Cinema Society. It's time for the Indie Spotlight, our second section of the evening. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Betzler, here live in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm in a motel room. I got my MGD going. I'm going to need this after that last discussion. And yeah, I've had a crazy 24 hours or more. And if you've been watching our vlogs on our YouTube page, you've been at least my vlogs. You might have a little sense about that. I think Davy Joe is going to come on the vlog. Speaking of which, here are some of my co-hosts this evening. Let's start with Drunk Davy. Drunk Davy, when's your first vlog going to be?
I don't know. It's I'm keeping everyone on their toes.
Okay, it's coming though, right? You promised. You said we talked about it over the phone. We're like, you're going to start vlogging.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Okay. J Money will likely not vlog. This is J Money. He's our elitist, and he's too good for vlogging. Isn't that about right?
Yes, I would never try to approach the common man's social media. As soon as I find a body double for vlogging, that's really the key for me, I think.
Yeah. But you have been watching my vlogs.
Yeah, they're great.
Oh, wow. A rare positive reinforcement from J Money. Even I don't like them that much, but they're fairly easy. Anyway, here's the full schedule for the night in case you have not did not know. We just talked about Girl on the Train. So if you're super interested in Girl on the Train, you can stop watching us now and go watch that. It's now fully on YouTube. But don't actually go just yet. Wait till we finish this discussion of Martha Marcy May Marlene, the Indie Spotlight. Coming up next in about 25 minutes is our discussion of Forrest Gump, a classic of the evening, which I screened in Los Angeles in March or April. I can't remember which. And Sound Off, which is going to have Davy's famous diatribe. I'm going to do a top 5 movies, mystery movies, top 5 murder mystery movies, because we talked about Girl on the Train. And I've also got a second run movie. And we might answer, not really answer, but we might bring up that you're asking us questions. We're going to talk about questions that you're asking us that we're not going to answer. That's coming up in the Sound Off at the end of the evening at 10 p.m. Eastern, which is the time zone that I'm in, incidentally. So you guys, how you guys feeling? You ready to talk about this next movie?
Yeah, let's dive in.
I have to do my tidbit alerts, though. Oh. So let's not dive in, but I appreciate your enthusiasm. I also forgot about the tidbit alerts, but we give these clues on Facebook and on the show about what the next Indie Spotlight is going to be. So on the show, we said it was an alliterative cult movie, and it could be called a cult movie in 2 different ways. It's a movie about a cult, and it is sort of a cult success movie. Martha Marcy May Marlene, which is fun to say. Anyway, and the other clue is it's the movie in which the world. His clue on Facebook was the movie in which the world discovered there was a third sister. A clue that J Money wasn't super excited about, but it kind of had fun. It was the first movie where we knew that there was another Olsen, Elizabeth Olsen, of course, being the sister of the Olsen twins. Did you know that before this movie, Davy Joe?
No.
See? I told you the world discovered it. So that explains everything. Okay. So it's time for the summary. You guys going to listen this time?
I will listen.
Yeah, see how I deal with everybody? All right, time for summary. There is Martha. When we first meet her, she's running, but we don't know what from. She winds up at her sister's idyllic lakeside house in Connecticut, and we find she's been MIA for 2 years. What we discover that those around her never do is that she spent those 2 years as part of a strangely entrancing cult in upstate New York, and the experience has left its mark on her in more ways than one. How do you guys feel about the summary?
Yeah, totally. That's it.
One of these days, I'm gonna mess it up, and they're gonna be like, and I also like how J Money's graphic title says Martha Marcy, etc. It was a nod to our last classic that came out.
I can only type it so many times before I was like, I'm done with doing this again. Besides the fact that I have to look it up every time because I feel like I screw it up. Like I changed the order a solid 2 or 3 times. That's my fault.
Because you couldn't remember how it was actually.
It's a lot of M's together.
Which order the names are in?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like this flows together. Martha Marcy May Marlene. I feel like it flows.
Yeah, try typing.
I mean, I did. Anyway, this is one of my many 2011 recommendations. It's funny because after watching it, I learned that I knew one of the producers, and he was a PA for me at one point, and then also he was a producer for a film that I was an AD for back in 2001.
Oh, wow.
And no, 2001 was when he was a PA. In 2003, he was a producer, and I threw him off set because he was a douchebag. So, and he lied, and there's lots of lying going on, and I can't abide that on set. But anyway, so I wanted to not like it this second time around, but I couldn't help it. I liked it more than I remembered, actually. I feel like it's mesmerizing and hypnotic. I think it's terrifically directed. We talked about the lack of tone in The Girl on the Train. I think this is the opposite end of that spectrum, and a great consistency of tone, outstanding performances all around. I mean, like, if I had minor cons, I would say I wished they had some more coverage at times, and you know, I can talk about that in more detail. And also, like, narrative ambiguity, which, like, there were times I'm like, I don't want to know this, and there were times like I could just want a little bit more. Minor cons, a movie I liked overall, but I mean, like, if we're going to be nitpicking, that's something that I might bring up. So this, and you know, the other thing, for what it's worth, this is towards the end of my 2011. I think I've got 2 more 2011 movies, and we started in Shame back in January, and we've been doing 2011 movies all the way since. So, and I've been doing them in my preferential order. And these guys have been mostly on board with that. I think they liked Melancholia a little more than I did, as much as I love Melancholia, and I liked, obviously, Melancholia better than this movie. Let's see what they feel about Martha Marcy May Marlene. A lot of M's in that last 30 seconds. Davey Joe, you're up first.
No, I've been looking forward to talking about Borat Meets the Mansons ever since I saw it. So,
I don't know what to glean from that. Did you like the movie? I can't tell.
No, I did.
Okay. Did you understand what that meant, J Money?
No, I did not.
Okay,
Sorry,
great.
clarify.
All right, you're up, J Money. What did you think?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty solid movie.
This seems like a J Money-esque film.
I can see that, and you were correct, sir. It is a J Money-esque film, definitely.
All right, so let's talk about the thing that I was the most effusive about. And I know you were nodding during some of my cons, so we can talk about that too, because I think I'm fascinated by that. But let's talk about the tone. How do you guys feel about that comment I made about the evocativeness? I mean, I think it's really strong and hypnotic. You know, did that work for you guys? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like the whole movie is a coiled snake that's you're never really sure what it's about to do for you. And I feel like the way that they kind of stretched out tension across the movie, where there's, you know, in a lot of ways, very little actually happening. You know, it's really a series of flashbacks, and a lot of people kind of like looking furtively off in the distance. But even so, I mean, it's a constantly a tense movie. It's a movie where you feel like, you know, there's a threatening quality to it consistently that kind of holds your attention. And I believe that is part of the tone.
Okay, and Davey Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all kinds of different types of tension in this film too. I mean, it kind of keeps that same tone, but I mean, at one point you're like, oh my God, you're super. That's the Borat reference. It's just like you want to like leave the room because you're just so embarrassed for this girl, and then the next minute you're horrified.
That was a stretch, that reference. I have to say, if that was what led to the Borat reference, then I don't think that works.
I don't know. It's kind of, or The Office or something like that, where I was just like, oh, I can't watch this.
The Office, like the television show.
She was just so. I was just so embarrassed for her. Like, she's no sense of. It's just
the way people live now. Yeah, we can talk about that shortly.
Yeah. But then
so one
also.
One of the things that, yeah.
And then the next minute it's scary, and you're like, you know, that's the different type of tension. Like, you know, oh my God, something horrible is about to happen.
One of the things that J Money alluded to that I was going to talk about later on was structure and sort of the temporal relations going on within this movie. How do you guys? I mean, like, it sounds like you feel like this added to the tension, J Money, but the way that they went back and forth in time, you know, in terms of how the story unfolded. You know, like I assume that it sounded like it worked for you. Do you disagree with that? And how does Davy Joe feel?
No, it definitely worked for me. I don't know how Davy Joe feels about it. Let's see.
Well, I wasn't asking you how
No,
Davy Joe feels. I was sort of doing two questions at once.
But you did ask me, so here I am.
Davy Joe, I guess I'll officially ask you now. How did you feel about this movie? About the temporal relations?
Yeah, no, I liked it a lot, and I didn't know if either of you would, because I remember the Free State of Jones thing. It really annoyed, I think, both of you when they did that.
But I mean, in fairness, I think Free State of Jones felt unstructured, like it felt all over the map in that regard. Like it felt a little, you know, unplanned and not well thought out. I mean, I think the thing that made it the work is the transitions. Like the transitions back and forth between past and present was fairly seamless.
It was completely seamless.
Okay.
Completely seamless. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Like sometimes you could like, oh my God, did it change?
Right.
The water. Yeah.
The water one's is a memorable one. And so yeah, I think that they did a real nice job with that, and it sort of soothed you into it. And I think it also suggests some parallels between the two worlds that we're seeing her live in, and we'll maybe get to that a little later. The thing that that was my next thing. So great. So maybe we'll get to it now. Parallels between the two worlds. You know, am I off base on that? You were nodding. So David Joe, you take the floor.
No, you're absolutely right, and it kind of it worked really well because it would trigger her behavior. So it was really a really nice, interesting piece of writing. This film is really a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I want to take this time too, while it's on my mind, to apologize to the audience for. I mean, my hair's getting a little long, and I'm a little unshaven, so you know, apologize for my appearance.
Yeah,
hopefully,
right, JB. We were all waiting for this.
Glad I brought this up right now in the middle of the discussion, but it was on my mind. We're off the cut. So yeah, in terms. See, when I cut to myself, I'm like, oh, wow, that's happening again. In terms of the parallel worlds, I mean, like, I think what I read, what I gleaned from it is that she didn't feel at home in either place. That's sort of the you know, my interpretation of it. J Money?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You get a sense that she's unsettled anywhere she is, and I also feel like to build on that idea. I feel like they were cutting back and forth in a way that was intentionally at times confusing because they were trying to emphasize her own confusion, you know, the kind of her own sense of sort of struggling to understand her reality at the moment. You know, in a lot of ways, I feel like we were confused as viewers in the same way that she seemed to be unable to kind of piece together what her life had become. And it kind of
I mean, you get the sense that wherever she goes, like there's no, like, until she figures her own, I was going to say the S word again that Davy Joe frowns upon, but until she figures her own stuff out, she's not, it's going to be the same thing wherever she goes.
You talking about Satan?
It's a family show.
What's that, Davy?
I was just saying it's a family show, JB. That's
no, I'm talking about until she figures her own stuff out. You figure she's gonna like be unsettled wherever she is. Like you know, like we only saw two worlds, but is she ever until like I feel like she needed to do some internal work first.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a real sense that we haven't gotten to her performance yet, but she really kind of exudes anxiety in a way that's entirely believable. And I feel like that is at the root of either the flashbacks or her current state in the movie. You know, you kind of get this really sense of this idea that she is completely kind of unable to figure out where she should put roots down, where she should kind of like stand in these two different places. And the way they cut back and forth again, I think really just helps emphasize that and sort of strengthens the tension that I felt like was throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, and I also like it. It also felt to me like when she was returning home, and I'm jumping ahead here, but I mean, or behind really, because I've been jumping all around. But what you said reminded me of it. I felt like she was like a veteran returning home from war.
Oh yeah,
like
She did PTSD, and like that was one of the bigger issues I think the movie was trying to address in a lot of ways, especially since it was so unspoken and not really understandable by everybody around her. So,
right, or by the audience in some cases, which is a segue. You mentioned this earlier, and when I mentioned it during my preamble, you were nodding, and the audience didn't see that. But we talked narrative ambiguity, and I thought this was a kind of a fun picture to use to represent narrative ambiguity. So, I mean, like, I feel like the way I feel like, you know, the lack of coverage, like sometimes it was really nice and spot on, and sometimes I wish for a little more information. Just like give me like a little hint, or, you know what I mean? Like it's a delicate balance. But you know, like there were times, and this is like brings it back for me, is I feel like it was keeping me at an arm's length, and I you know, like I didn't need to be brought in completely, but there were times where I just wanted a little more, just give me a little more of a hint, and maybe it was there and I missed it. But also times I feel like, and it's hard to know what, you know, how much is too much and so forth and so on. Where do you guys?
I would ask you, even JB, as a filmmaker, I think that I would struggle with trying to manage that if I had to like watch the same material over and over again. Like as you get deeper into editing something down, and as you kind of play with it and tinker with it for months at a time, I feel like that's a really hard, probably fine line to walk to really kind of perfect it. By the end of
the dispensing of information is one of the most important parts of the directing editing process. Like, and understanding, like, I mean, like even. You know, like until, for example, you gave me a huge note on. I mean, I think you were one of the last test screenings, J Money, of Homecoming, and you like made it clear to me that there was a scene that I didn't need, and I thought it was like super important in my head because I mean, like I've been experiencing this. You're like, no, I figured this out like X, Y, long time ago, you know, and I'm like, oh, so I don't need this at all. And you know, like it's very hard, but I think the screenings are what help.
I mean, that's a really hard thing to hear, right? It's a really hard thing to take creative direction and or at least get people's outside perspective on this stuff after it's been your baby.
I mean, like I don't even think about it as creative direction. I mean, you know, like it didn't hurt my feelings because it was like, oh, you don't feel like it's good to know that the audience doesn't feel they need this information, you know, like, or they got it a lot sooner. And the other thing that you don't want to do is keep giving them information they feel like they've already got that feels like they're wasting their time. So that's one of the most important, like what I don't like, I mean, like is, you know, like a lot of times in focus group screenings you get like conflicting reports, but I mean like, and you have to like choose, you know, you have to filter through the BS and stuff. But I think that one of the most important things is getting a sense of what information is needed. And sometimes they have information that is needed, but they don't want it. Like they'd rather not know this about a certain character or something like that. Right. That's helpful too. So I assume that they had screenings and had enough confidence from them to go without either that, or they didn't have screenings and didn't care what we thought, which is another, that's a possibility. Certainly, you know, like I could see this producer saying that. And also one of the producers is also the director of that movie, Christine, that we talked about too, J Money. The director, Antonio Campos, was a producer on this. Davey Joe, ambiguity, narrative ambiguity.
Oh, you know, I was just I had actually a question for you about that. Would you say that it's better to err on the side that you feel they erred on? You know, wanting a little bit more rather than.
No, not for better or for worse. I don't think that is that would not be my choice. If I had to err, I'd rather err on the audience having the information. That would be where I would lean. But it differs by the person. But I mean, like to me, you know, like story is first, and like this movie, I would say is almost more about mood than actual plot. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And so I think that they made a different kind of choice. But for me, I would rather, you know, focus on a story and try and give too much information. And I could tell more stories and give more examples from my own career, but we're out of time, and who wants that anyway? So anyway, so that's that. I mean, we're out of time, but there's a couple. I wanted to talk about some themes. We've touched on it a little bit, but I also wanted to talk about you had brought up her performance. I mean, I think all the performances are great, but let's talk about her just for a second. You talked about the anxiety. She was really raw, and I don't know if you remember J Money, but I titled this photo "Keen Painting," and if you can look at those eyes, and I think that's I think that's the key to performance. Those big, deep eyes are extremely expressive, and with the lack of dialogue, she really gets a lot out through them. And like that's when I talk about cinematic acting, this is the kind of thing that I am referring to. She I feel like she feels very raw sometimes, especially when in scenes with my one of my favorite actors, Sarah Paulson. I think she feels less trained, and that's not a bad thing. Like it works for their dynamic for sure.
Sure.
But I mean, like she feels like rough around the edges, but I feel like it works. I don't know. So that's my thoughts on performance. Davy Joe?
No, she was completely believable, and I think it's hard sometimes to kind of she basically seemed like someone who had been through hell and back, even when she wasn't really doing very much. So it was a great performance.
Okay, so if we had to like sum up a major theme in this movie, and like if we can keep this as short as possible, like how would you sum it up? I would say a major theme for me is, what is home? HOME. What is the meaning of the word home, and how does that relate to us? That's a theme that I gleaned from it. What about you guys?
I mean, one word would be family. Just
that was actually my next one. What is family? Yeah. That was the second one I had down there. So, if this were Family Feud, you'd be scoring well.
Avoid upstate New York. I believe that is a predominant theme throughout.
Anyway, identity is another one that I wrote down. But anyway,
that's basically what I just said.
You did in a way. I could interpret it as that. All right, guys, what do you say that we go?
Let us go.
All right, man.
We got a classic coming up. Our next film is a Pacific North. Next indie on November 21st is a Pacific Northwest indie that is currently only available on Vimeo at a price. So hopefully I'll be paid and I can pay the price and rewatch this movie from 2011.
Thanks a lot, JB.
What's that?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, JB.
Yeah. Davy Joe's sponsoring. Going to be sponsoring that, I think.
There you go.
So anyway, that's our next indie on November 21st at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. And next up is our classic. Too much beer. Next up is a classic, Forrest Gump, 1994. And that should be an interesting, possibly heated discussion. We'll see. Next up on the No Name Cinema Society.